Hello once again, everyone. So, bonus video slash ramble. So, I want to talk about a small sword method that is a rather humorous one that doesn't get a ton of attention. I mean, it does here and there, especially amongst people who do practice small sword or alternatively any sort of British military swordsmanship. But it is Hope's method of small sword. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because recently I got into a bout with one of my guys who is an Olympic-style fencer. And he was using a foil, I was using my small sword. And I realized very quickly that he was outclassing me, and he also had the longer sword of the two of us, which was a bit of a mistake on my part. Never hand your opponent a longer sword. But either way, this caused me to remember Hope's method and use it, and once I started using it, I had a lot more success. So what is Hope's method of small sword, and why would it protect me against a more experienced slash just, more in line with whatever we were doing fencer? Well, Hope's method of small sword can kind of be summed up as the idea of you've gotten yourself into a fight and you're not necessarily prepared for it slash confident with yourself. How can you survive it, right? And something that can be trained very quickly. Doesn't require a ton of practice. Basically, normally when we fight with the small sword, we would be like so, hand up, all that great stuff, right? We've got inside, outside, low outside, right? And you do still have the hanging guard somewhat, but it's very rarely used, and it's going to be lunges in this plane. Now, Hope's method is basically, instead of trying to fight someone here, I'm going to raise, and I'm going to let my tip drop down between. Now, every time they attack, I have very, very strong parries, right? He attacks on this line, I can very easily shear that off to the side. He attacks underneath, no problem. If he tries to go over, I can raise. I kind of got this almost windshield wiper type of defense. And it looks funny at first, but trust me, it works. Even when someone is really, really good and very quick with their tip, it's not a lot of motion for me to protect myself here. And if I miss, right? So he's attacking, I've gone here, he comes back in, a little bit of movement, and I'm out of the way. I only have to dodge a thrust. That's not particularly difficult to do. Now, Hope says what you should do is, after performing this parry, you defend from side to side, keeping yourself safe, and you should only attack when you are 100% sure you will hit. So essentially what you do is you go up into this high position and I frustrate my opponent. Because from his perspective, you're not doing anything terribly complicated. In fact, it's almost a little bit insulting at first, because here this guy is, who you have on the back foot, who's just defending with the grossest motor motion he can, and not even attacking back at you. So what are some likely things you're going to start doing? Well, you're going to start utilizing feints to try and get around that guard. As we just talked about, that isn't particularly hard for me to defend either, right? Okay, that's more frustrating. We could try closing with him. Okay, so he tries to grab hold of my arm. No problem. I can quickly bring this back and escape. Or if he is going for that arm, that's another opportunity for me to attack. It's not impenetrable, mind you, but it very quickly frustrates and or confounds the opponent because there's not an immediate way to just dismantle it. Sometimes you will get lucky, right? If you're on the attacker's part, you can catch them because they're a little bit slower or something along those lines. But for the most part, or alternatively, you could also catch them on their attack, which we'll talk about in a moment. But for the most part, it is just a frustrating thing to run up against. And for someone who is either tired, outclassed, or something along those lines, it is a pretty good thing to fall back on because it will keep you alive. Now, when do you attack and how do you attack? So, like I said, Hope recommends that you just focus on defending yourself, and only when you are 100% sure should you launch your attack. So, let's say, for example, he finally lunges, I parry here, right? So I've parried to my inside. At this point, all I'm going to do is on his recovery or what have you, if I'm 100% certain, if I can, I could grab, that would be excellent. But if I'm 100% certain I've got him, I've gotten the measure of him, and I know his exact recovery timing, I'm going to just either extend my tip and thrust, or I can extend the tip, turn over, and thrust for a little bit more reach. It's going to feel funky at first, this idea of turning over into your attack, but remember, we don't have edges on these. I mean, slight edges here and there depending upon which make of small sword you have, but for the most part, I just got to get the point on him and push it through him. Not particularly difficult to do. Same thing on the outside, I've parried, I'm going to just raise the tip, execute my lunge. Right? Very simplistic. So that's really it. I mean, there's, of course, Hope wrote more stuff, but for the most part, if you were to boil it down to information to give to someone who's going to fight possibly even just tomorrow, right? You just tell them, hey, hang out here, defend anything that comes against you, keep your distance, and then when you are 100% certain you can't miss, nail them. So I used it recently, and it worked ridiculously well. Now, an important thing to remember is, of course, that the person I was fighting did not know of Hope's method. I explained it to him after, and he's like, oh, okay, right? So that is something to consider. But as just a fun little tidbit that came up recently and saved me in a, as close to a historical context as I could really get without, forcing it, if you will, I just thought I'd talk about it. So either way, that's the basics of Hope's method of Smallsword. Maybe it'll help you. And we'll talk about some other techniques another time.